Welcome to the Park Cultural Landscapes Program video series on pruning basics. In this video, NPS arborist Keith Park will introduce the basic tools used in preservation horticulture and how to care for them. We'll also share some important safety information for NPS staff and volunteers working in the field. Before beginning a pruning project, familiarize yourself with the tools that will best suit your project goals and work environment. Non-power tools and equipment have the greatest range of utility in the national parks, both geographically and in terms of users. Let's meet Keith and learn about the tools and techniques involved in the day-to-day maintenance of historic vegetation.
A lot of the work that I and others do in parks involves pruning and cleaning of plant material. In this video, I'll show you some of the tools that I prefer to use to perform these tasks and how to use them safely and effectively. First, let's start by talking about the various different types of tools available to us for pruning and cleaning plant material and their various attributes. Most of these tools fall into one of two types. You have bladed tools, and then you have tools with teeth. We can identify 4 different specific tools that you're likely to need for any kind of pruning job: the bypass hand pruner, loppers, hand saws, and pole saws or long reach pruners. Another type of toothed tool is the chainsaw. However, chainsaws come with their own caveats and training requirements in the Park Service, so we'll talk about this one a little bit later. Between these 4 types, you can accomplish just about any kind of pruning task you would need, from small fine pruning up to medium or even big sized pruning cuts. The bypass hand pruner is called that because it has 2 moving parts that move past each other to accomplish a clean cut. One part is a sharp bladed part. The opposite is a blunt holding blade. Hand pruners are really effective at pruning material off up to a 1/2 inch diameter. With this apricot branch, we can see how easily we cut through material using clean, concise cuts. Loppers work exactly the same way as a bypass hand pruner, only with the advantage of a longer handle for added leverage. For removal of plant material up to 1 inch in diameter, loppers will be the preferred tool. Remember though, they are bypass pruners in nature, so they have a sharp cutting blade and a holding blade. Try to keep the sharp cutting blade against the part of the plant that you're going to keep to make the cleanest cut. Now, while hand pruners and loppers might be fine for getting through small to medium-sized material, sometimes you just need a bit more oomph, and that's where hand saws come in. Right in front of me, I have a very large curved blade hand saw, which also has large-sized teeth. These teeth are designed to cut on the push and the pull, and the curve really allows you to just bear down on the material and get through it a lot quicker than you might think. They also have folding saws, like these 2. So what's the difference between folding and fixed bladed saws? Well, really it's just portability. Folding saws are nice because when folded, they're safe, they're not going to cut anything, and you can put it right in your pocket. Fixed blade saws sit in plastic scabbards. The advantage of a fixed blade saw is if you're in a position where you really just don't want to take 2 hands and open up a thing and have to use 2 hands to put it away again. Fixed blade saws are nice because they just go into the scabbard, 1 hand, you pull it out, you use it, you put it back, and it's stowed safely. Choosing the right sized tool for the job is important. Sometimes you have a pruning job that requires something larger than the small saw, in which case, if you have access to a large saw, that would be the tool to choose. Sometimes material will be beyond the reach of basic hand tools that you can use from the ground. In instances like this, long reach tools such as pole saws and pole pruners make a great choice for reaching from the ground without having to get out a ladder. Whenever pruning overhead, it's always important to wear a hard hat and glasses to avoid getting struck by any falling material or getting debris in your eyes. During our overview of the different types of pruning tools, I had briefly mentioned the chainsaw as an effective and efficient tool in the pruner's toolkit. However, it has to be stated that only park staff certified in chainsaw use are allowed to use them. I find the chainsaw very effective for grounds work when we have things like downed limbs that need to be processed for chipping. I don't particularly want to use a hand saw or a pole saw to cut up all these limbs and process it to fit into the chipper. So we usually go with the chainsaw And sometimes we go with the electric chainsaw. It's quieter, doesn't pollute, but it's a very efficient and quick way to cut up and process a lot of wood. As a pruning tool, it can also be a very effective tool, but you have much less control over the types of cuts, so it really should be reserved for those times when the limbs are too big to cut with a handsaw or you have no other tool available to you. Another tool that I find indispensable, especially when pruning up in the canopy of a tree, is the three-legged tripod ladder, sometimes called an orchard ladder. The tripod orchard ladder is designed to be set up on uneven ground, but should never be used indoors or on hard, flat surfaces because the legs might splay out and the ladder could come crashing down. When setting up the tripod orchard ladder inside a tree, you want to take the tripod leg and thread it through the canopy, the scaffold limbs, making sure that the tripod leg is not too far out, nor is it too narrow, and making sure that the treads are horizontal and level in two directions.
Tripod ladders may also be used on slopes. When working on a slope, always keep the third leg on the uphill side and ensure the ladder rungs are horizontal.
Tripod orchard ladders range in height from about 6 feet tall to about 18 feet tall. And one of the benefits of using them to get up in the canopy of a tree is you have much better control of the pruning cuts with smaller hand tools. Loppers and pole saws and pole pruners are effective, but really, the closer you can get to the work, the better your cuts will be. When working aloft from an orchard ladder, always remember to make sure it's stable at every step, never go above the critical red step, and never reach too far from one side to the other, because the taller the ladder goes, the greater the risk of toppling over.
For taller vegetation not accessible from the ground or a ladder, lift equipment options include a bucket truck, a high lift, or a cherry picker. Fall protection and additional training is required to use lift equipment. Sometimes it's appropriate to climb a tree for access to its canopy. However, this is more unusual and should only be performed by a professional arborist.
In addition to the importance of choosing the right tool for the pruning job at hand, equally important is keeping your tools clean, sterilized, and touched up from job to job. Cleaning and sterilizing your tools will prevent the spread of disease from one plant to another, and keeping them touched up and sharp will prevent the excessive use of energy in the form of having to work harder than you need to get through the material. The best way to clean up, varnish, and build up off the blades is a simple wire brush. I use the brush to lightly rub off as much of the varnish and material and buildup as I can. When it comes to toothed tools like hand saws, you might notice a bunch of buildup in here, which could harbor disease and also just make the teeth less effective at cutting. The way I like to clean up these teeth is by wiping away from the blade until you've gotten the bulk of the buildup out of the teeth. And that's really all it takes to keep hand pruners and saws clean from varnish and buildup. When it comes to sterilizing, there are a couple different options. Most people use a 10% bleach solution or pine sol as a disinfectant and simply spray the tools and let it soak in. That definitely works. However, I find sometimes that it's a little drippy and a little messy. Sometimes it necessitates wiping the tools down again. So sometimes I actually use a flame torch when it's safe to do so. I simply hold it onto the tool until I'm satisfied that any remaining material that might be left on the blade has been sterilized. With hand saws, technically it's possible to sharpen them, but it's probably more efficient to simply buy a new blade when the tool wears out or becomes dull. However, bypass pruners and loppers can easily be sharpened up using diamond stone or any kind of file that you choose. What I like to do is stabilize the tool on a table or my knee if I'm in the field and make careful and consistent draws on the blade backwards. I never, again, just like the handsaw, I never want to sharpen towards the blade. If I slip, I might slice myself on the blade itself. Always draw towards yourself and away from the blade. After enough draws of the sharpening stone, you'll get that burr, at which point you simply take the file and get rid of the burr like that. And that should be enough to keep your tools in sharp, good condition.
For more information on the methods discussed in this video, please consult the materials listed here. You can also find links to these materials in the Common Learning portal under Preservation Horticulture Pruning Basics.